So we're really excited to have David here. I'm going to introduce him and then we'll get to see some exciting work. So David Jablonowski is based in Amsterdam, and he's had solo shows at such institutions as the Baltic Center for Contemporary Arts in the UK, the Kunstmünster, Germany, Gourmet Museum in The Hague, Netherlands, and Dallas Contemporary in Dallas, Texas. His works are, yeah, that one's quite familiar. So the works are included in a wide range of institutional and private collections, such as the Stinkster Museum, Stedelijk, and the collection of the Federal Republic of Germany, Bonn, Germany. He received his BA at the Reichsfeld Academy, followed by a 2-year residency at deSalle, Amsterdam, where he also works currently as a tutor. So let's welcome David.
Thanks for introducing me. Next time we try to learn it in advance. It's Stedelijk Museum and it's a Gemeentemuseum. Indeed, one of the, like, you have a throat problem after that. Yeah, I'm very happy to be here. Come over the sea to meet you all. And I had really brilliant studio visits already in the last weeks. And my special thanks go to Iris Eichenberg and to Heather McGill for having me here. And yeah, I'm very happy to have you here also in this beautiful room. And I'm going to start actually rough with the video piece. And I'm actually really switching in between, like it's not chronologically I show my work, and I will come back on it also why I'm not doing it chronologically later in the lecture. But maybe I just start MIDI. Put some historical music on you. Last year's show, Prosumer, featured a variety of videos that showed the shifted relations of consumers and producers. The worldwide availability of semi-professional reviews brought up a significant rise of companies that ensure their commerce on consumer reviews. For example, Amazon, once started as a sharing comment and review website, now revolutionized habits of demand and supply. The video shows sequences of people acting, landscapes passing, and animals eating. On the first hand, it seems that you look at a non-significant footage, actually sceneries that underlines a saying, you cannot not communicate. In addition, you can see an advertisement for the production of camera ships. That advertisement seems to refer to the entire reach of civil production, food, entertainment, distribution of commodities, military protection. The footage pretends nothing less than the ability of a semi-god, the creator-like reach, to keep the reels turning. The sound is a musical composition by György Ligeti, composed in 1968 for harpsichord. The title, Continuum, and the piece is being compared to a patient's description of their schizophrenic experience, of an intense cerebral activity in which inner experiences took place at greatly increased speed, so that much more than usual happened per minute of external time. The result was to give an effect of slow motion. Or as Ligeti describes in himself, the entire process is a series of sound impulses in rapid succession that create the impression of continuous sound. In its fundaments, the described melting of consumers and prosumers reflects Joseph Beuys' utopia of the society as being a social sculpture, and that every human ist ein Künstler, is an artist, as they all work together on a singular project, on a product. What we know at the last extension of the Kunstbegriff, while you could call his ideas inspired by socialist thoughts, the community, the today's losing of hierarchies in workforce, coming with the idea of prosumer, could be called the capitalist reply. And what you see actually here is shots from the museum show I did in Den Haag last year. This harpsichord was actually from the collection. It's from the 16th century, Venetian harpsichord. And we actually had it repaired. So on the opening, there was actually the sound piece played in the room on that harpsichord, which was pretty amazing, I have to say, as somebody played really on this living painting, if you want so. There are additional videos in the room, but I tried to make a little bit of a selection while describing the work. You see, among others, you see glass panels, you see aluminium tubes, you see marble plates, which I have here again. And actually, there's a lot of things in each picture to say, and I try to reduce it a little bit. But what I like, for example, with these marble tiles, they're actually from a company from Rotterdam, which is specialized in scanning surfaces. So these marble plates are actually like the leftovers from a scan. What that company actually does is in the end sell a memory stick with files with these prints, and it goes all over the world, and you can find it in all kinds of local houses or airports or whatever. So it's actually like a kind of distribution of that design, if you want so, and which has no function in the end anymore. And I am in contact with that company, and in the end I was able to pick it up actually. Okay, another work. The installation, The Golden Rules of Flaming, is based on the interest on how internet communication is traceable. Herein I use various layers of the material and the non-material, of communication technologies in general, and the exchange and distribution of knowledge specifically. The video footage and audio is based on 3 different tracing histories that led to the actual installation. The text for the audio, that also forms the title of the work, first kept my interest while following the revolution in Egypt in 2011. That was mainly communicated via online devices. Being interested in the history of blogging and news spreading, the rules of flaming came along as a kind of satirical guideline for using the internet for an anonymous exchange. The technical layer of those communication is visible in an animated steam train footage that explains the 7 layers of the open system interconnection model in computer networking. The OCI is a conceptual model that characterizes and standardizes the internet function of a communication system by partitioning it into abstraction layers. This is what happens in detail with each networking device in use. Researching the actual physical material sources of each device, one is quickly confronted with the processing of rare earth minerals. In 2011, those minerals reached record prices when China, owning 95% of the worldwide capacities, put an export stop for a period of time. Baotou is an industrial city in Mongolia in China. It is mostly known for its mining of those rare earths. As the processing is poisoning, the environmental critical press is kept out of reach of the actual mines. To my surprise, only a high amount of nostalgic steam train footage, film footage by Western tourists and Chinese train spotters can be found via the online linking of the search word Baotou. The installation zooms in and out on the distribution of materials, commodities, as well as the way narrating the complexity of being a user in our time, user in quotation marks, without the linearity of text, but via the method of cross-referencing. It took me a while to think which form or method I should choose to do a lecture about my artistic practice. The first idea was to link up my entire works and ideas as one long hyperlink, keychained or loose as ideas come to your mind while working on a new project. Physical material would lead to a story, would lead to a historical fact, subject memory, etc., etc.
The general thing about getting our populace to think about computer screens as doing more than just showing you what the book page could do is a very important sort of new exploration. I say new exploration because I don't think it has been pursued as fully as capable.
This was Doc Engelbart, died last year, 87 years old, in an interview talking about the future of text prior to a panel I participated in last year, and I will this year at Google headquarters in London. Doc was the developer of the computer mouse, predecessor of all touchpads, and the first hypertext system that he invented together with Ted Nelson. Finally, where the whole internet is based on, yes, and I also used a longer version of this interview, of this video, in my exhibition tools and orientation at the Baltic in Newcastle and my gallery in Amsterdam. Doc gave me actually the answer. It's just not time yet. Our paradigm wouldn't allow a lecture that works different than a book without a storyline but cross-referencing like hypertext would work, leading to non-cohesive or incomprehensible narratives, confusing you, my audience. At first, I would still call me a sculptor, or at least starting conceptually by the idea what sculpture can be, mean, or will be. What is the witness of a former action, lump, and impossible to squeeze through a fiber cable, or at least not yet, or let's say digitalized and distributed as a printed copy, but not as an original? What is this absurd, inefficient mass or assumption of materials that is difficult to be moved, that museum doesn't like because of its production and transport cost, and that eats up your money for storage? Please forgive me if it's a bit moving from one to the other. Let's say the materialization of the digital, to put it very simple. Digitization has influenced our way of perceiving images, surfaces, art, music, and objects. Those are also questions that inform my artistic practice to a great extent. However, I try to see what's behind the new functional surface. Digital images still look like images we know. On a phenomenological level, they still seem culturally familiar. Yet hidden beyond their surfaces is a binary system to process symbols and information. And this is an inherently different cultural technology. Which consequences arise from the fundamental chain, one might ask? This is a question for Friedrich Kittler and more so for Michel Foucault, since we are now entering the realm of media ecology. Kittler was the technocrat amongst the two of them, focusing almost solely on how the development of new technologies influence communication processes. Foucault, on the other hand, examined the social fabric that surrounded certain objects and media that were dominant at a time. He would look for the so-called conditions of possibility. How could a particular culture practice come into being at all? How did it become successful? Why did it disappear? It also promotes a heightened sense of awareness of the condition of production. What happens to manual labor in the digital age where information, data, and entertainment form the biggest economical sector? Intelligence, the economy of information beats food, or something like that. The digital ousts the real, and yet there seems to be the desire to know more about the actual physical products that surround us. Information about energy efficiency, sustainability seem to satisfy the need for product awareness. In the digital age, the actual physical production of objects and materials seem to have become quite an uncanny procedure, which we continually need to reassure ourselves about. In this respect, we can think of Foucault again, his notion of ecology in the counter term to histories or history. Those are constructed narratives which serve the purpose to create unity and coherence, to create nations, communities, and a sense of belonging. They are focusing on dominant interpretation and pass them on, ignoring counter-histories or side locations. This will always promote an artificial and hegemonic impression of a certain period of time. Foucault's intent is to undermine these tendencies by establishing a critical ecology, which doesn't smooth out all the discontinuities, the disruptions, but instead lays them bare and examines them. And this critical reflective approach that is taking historical situation into account as well as current processes and projections into the future is what I work within my pieces. I like to look for these resistive moments that prevent the one and only coherent history from being perpetuated forever. Bochum, in the Ruhr area, my hometown, was once the biggest production area of Europe and a motor of industrial revolution. Specialized in steel innovation, it was the Bochumer Verein that was inventing new vacuum molding techniques for iron in the mid-20th century. And it was a city that saw the first industrial decline of the secondary sector, but knew how to early bound new technologies and knowledge by settling General Motors, Opel is from Bochum, and the biggest campus university to its infrastructure. Why am I mentioning this? Nonetheless, I remember taking part in solidarity demonstration marches in the early 80s as a kid. The change of time and needs, as well as the change in technologies and social cultural structures, came here the first time to my mind. The press text of my work would maybe read David Jablonowski, the News and Materials, as well as communication technologies, like you read earlier in your text, big techie works. I would more put the finger on the notorious interest in general. Maybe more the questioning around methods of asking, not as a stable factor, but more as a continuously interrupted, negotiable thinking about what artistic production means within my own approach and in our time. Let me go a bit back in my practice. This is 2009, while I actually finished the ateliers in Amsterdam. The Imposition series is a part of body of work that went back to earlier translation of information into form. The Manesse Codex, or also called Große Heidelberger Liederschrift, kept my attention while I visited the Wartburg in East Germany. The castle, where Martin Luther also translated the Bible, was also known for its Minnesang competition, or some even say Minnesang War, an earlier form of poetry battles in our days. The evil word communication within the arts is quickly made up to be too didactical or topical, but form the guideline in my work. Here I was more interested how information is communicated. My interest in the imagery of that codex aroused by the symbolic qualities of the paper forms that seem to be placeholders for a variable. You see the commissioner and the artist exchanging information. The artist, the Minnesänger, like the singing partner, was a live medium and functioned in the Middle Age as a mediator and entertainer. As in our day poetry battles, he was reacting ad hoc on expectations and objection. The images function as a pedestal for the ceramic. I look at those forms as a first primitive attempt to the transformation of material. That rather than interpret the aesthetics of the exchanging gesture, my attention was kept by the used material and the history of the form the figures came up with. This gap of information brought to my mind the question of an utopian direct error-free communication. Especially the online availability of the just shown footage combined with a lack of physical experience led my sculpture process until my recent practice. So these came out in the first place, actually I like to tell it like how they appeared actually, because they like these images I collected, they were in my studio. I had this piece of clay in my studio, and there was just this thing going on that I was starting cutting the clay, and in a very rude sense, I just folded them, baked them, and then put them on the images. And this is actually what came later out of that started research. You see them in the back, but the other work, the big one on the right, is called Imposition 2, and what I really was interested in to make like a kind of singular form that actually has a kind of rhetoric, like kind of input on you, let's say. So I wanted to do something that is really overwhelming you, that the space is really making you aware of. This is another piece from that part of work that is in the Stedelijk Museum in 2009. That is around 4 meter high, so the perspective from here is good. Sometimes the roof was actually in front of it. Good, then we go further. Oh, it's a bit low resolution. Dig into historical significances of mediators, sculpture, text, and tablets. I ended up on a plane to Iran in the end of 2009. The Cirrus cylinder, a clay cylinder with Akkadian cuneiform script and hosted at the British Museum, kept my attention due to its various interpretation and misusage within its 2,500 years old history. Here you see the Shah Pahlavi. This is in the museum in London. Here you see the Shah Pahlavi on the parade at Persepolis for the 2,500 years Persian Empire ceremony in 1971. And the leftovers, and the leftovers of that celebration was my visit in 2009. There are, or at least were, apart from the original 2 official copies, one was at the United Nations in New York, once given as a present by the Shah, and the other one to the Azadi Museum underneath the same called square in Tehran. Different from what I hoped to see the copy of the cylinder in its significant embedding, I was confronted with an extraordinary museum display. I asked myself the questions: how much of an artifact lies within a copy, and how to make a display for the glorifying moment of a sculpture's history? The cylinder, as being defended as one of the earliest proclamation of civil rights, how will it be displayed in our days Iran? I couldn't find the copy. But instead of that, I have had the most significant museum experience until now. Socio-cultural heritage, economical pride, natural history, and post-revolution glorification were bound and dipped into neon light aesthetics and a Hollywood theme park atmosphere that reminded me of Mike Kelly's installations, combined with a 1980 Ghost Train and a child nightmare after watching The Evening Sandman. I have to correct the former East Bloc Sandman nightmare due to the aesthetics which were a leftover of the Shah close to the West and East politics. A Czechoslovakian artist and puppet theater group, you can see it pretty well in this picture, juxtaposed their aesthetics and puppet designs next to a high amount of film projections. That display was seen as the most advanced multimedia display with its inauguration in 1975. The creative sound and light installation required 12,000 meter of film, 20,000 color slides, 20 movie projectors, and 120 slide projectors controlled by 5 computers. So this is actually the installation, and what I did, I mainly filmed it, and it came back in a presentation at the Stedelijk Museum Bureau. This was in 2010. It was just with a change of years. Yes, and what you actually see, I really tried to find a way to like put it into sections, let's say, that experience. So partly I had the movie really playing on that screen there, but also hidden. So on the first time when you enter the space, you really see it as a kind of noise, and then later you really could see the actual space and the theatrical representation. And furthermore, I use these sculpture blocks. What you see there is actually carved plaster, like I do it with a grinder, and it's all dusty outside when I do it. And I really use actually the idea of a computer editing program, the way I actually translated those sculptures in the room. So they actually all have names of like port where a connection is made, or a loop where something is looped in the video program, and took it as a kind of starting point to come up with that sculptures. This is at Kunsthalle Basel together with James Welling and Latifa Echak and Josh Smith. This was in 2010 exactly. And and this is, let's say, an extension of that work, where I actually really tried to recreate that atmosphere, let's say, from the space itself. So the mirror cubes, I used actually all these kind of materials that I was not afraid of in before, but I really got into my language actually by this exploring those aesthetics in Iran. And I wasn't afraid of kitsch anymore. That was pretty good after that. So this is indeed in the Netherlands, and what you see is actually projection from three sources, one from behind, one from the front, and one projector you see on top, which actually functions also as a kind of projection surface. So what I really wanted is actually that the projector itself becomes a sculpture too, that it's not like a hidden something where light comes out, but really something that's part of the work. This is at Bloomberg Space in London, headquarters of Bloomberg. They have a big exhibition space in London, and I was invited to do an exhibition there in 2011. They do regularly, on a regular basis, they do exhibition with young artists. And so this is, for example, the upside down projection, like kind of mirrored in it, and it got really like, it really got into the space, let's say. It was really like a total environment, if you want. So it was, okay, of course I say so, but no, it was pretty much an experience, as you were really part of the whole situation, and people told me like they were really on the train back to Iran, actually, where I had the footage of. Okay. As a kind of break within my cultural and aesthetic adventures, as well as elaborations to the Middle East region, I see the entry of or production tools within my approach to sculptural materials. Inspired by the idea that those objects are used for duplication, digitalizing the material of paper, or the impossibility of the volume of an object, I introduced them as a kind of possible lack or disappearance of meaning through function. Once information would be translated into the digital, the physics would be gone. A feeling of relief would be felt knowing that the paper made its entry to another world, the world of availability and exchange. Victor Hugo writes in his novel Notre Dame de Paris, among others, about the change of media and especially the death of architecture as a monumental narrator. Book in its place would fly out like a flock of birds and have, in contrast to buildings, the ability to be in the same time in various places. What he would have thought about a scanner that can address users in seconds all over the world. Materials from different epochs of multiplication history pile on each other with basic sculpture materials like granite, plaster, or bronze. The hardware becomes material, turns out to be symbolic, but loses its operational function. While questioning what would be left and what is a real object led me to the volume series, which you see over here. They are both real and they are fake. Tons of altered concrete turns out to be styrofoam. The traces on the ground lead you to the thinking that they are made site-specific. What are the remains if you translate material? They are unstable objects lacking realness. But still, the volume can't be neglected. They need space to be mounted in, and you need time to perceive them. While placing them, I considered also their moment of photographic reproduction, the opposite of the translation of pictures simulating realness. This happened, for example, in this work with the spice still life. Here the translation of the simulation is made into real. So what you actually see, like you see on this picture also, is actually I used, let's say, the advertisement character of this Canon EP 2700, and which I have really used as a sculpture material in the work. But on the other hand, I use the advertisement that always comes out with that printer and translate it into the still life. So you really have the whole senses with it again. So you smell the curry, and actually the entire room smelled of that. This is another example where I introduced like real food or real leaves or really like things that are really rotting away, let's say, as a kind of still life, thinking about a memento mori. The offset printing plate is the most recent hardware losing its significance in the reproduction business. Digital printing is taking away the necessity of a sheet that needs to be produced, distributed, exposed to light, chemically processed, and distributed again. Both the light prism, that is a side effect of the preceding rolling mill process of the pure aluminium by differences in temperatures, as well as the photoreactive surface, speak to the visual perception in the first place. Within my work, I use them as a minimal relief, just 0.5 millimeter thin. I feel as if my work has to compete with the ever thinner devices and intelligent surfaces. Multi-skin technologies, touch skin, touch pads, or how you want to name it. Gesture controlling, the swiping of your fingers, etc., do more and more the job. The losing of the body and the translation of volume into 2D sheets brings up a new conception of materiality that will not only change the formal level of receiving, but will also transform the production as well as the communication of objects. You can name them viewers, contributors, or users. Or take the term user experience, brought up to writer knowledge by Donald Norman, a user experience architect in the mid-1990s, who claims that the recent advances in mobile, social, and tangible computing technologies led to a shift away from usability engineering to a much richer scope of user experiences where users' feelings, motivations, and values are given as much attention than efficiency, effectiveness, and basic subject satisfaction. The negotiation of the amount of information that material can bear and the mass of added information via historical embedding led me to the works that make me think about materials limits or the surplus information it can be related to. By this, I mean the context of each involved material becomes a commodity of a work. For example, I like to name the work screenshots, which you just see over here, that consist of recordings of trackback surfaces. The almost abstract expressionist character of the fingerprint says much as little about gestures of a user mode. It is a trace history of actions, as well as an unconscious witness of creation. As much as the almost invisible traces, the projector and its RGB light technology are intertwined with the allegoric qualities of the added spice still life. What is that wide or broad array of color lights consisting of red, green, and blue that can be manipulated to represent the widest variety of pictures of moving imagery possible? The grotesque, the educative, the evil, the beauty, etc., etc. The visual is combined with tools for physical creation, a blue chisel, a piece of blue sandpaper, as well as red chili and green asparagus. As self-evident as it first seems, it is exactly the intimacy to an object that triggers me, an additional layer of identification to cool surfaces. I also quote media theorist Vito Campanelli, "The human-computer interface is a continuum of other cultural interfaces. For example, we acquire from print and from cinema the metaphors of the rectangular page and frame." So these are pictures. This is, for example, at the Dallas Contemporary part of the work I showed there, which actually also brought together this kind of still life and the projector as the same material as cast aluminium on the left side, and also video recordings I did on the site where it was produced, the aluminium in kiln. The work, film still, 2.39 by 1, is a fresco-like made wall that uses the aspect ratio of theatrical showing, namely 2.39 by 1, and is combined with an additional 10,000 watt heat source. Both the unconsciously known format and the non-visible heat source led to a fragmented experience of that rectangular format. I found the necessity of breaking that frame in earlier Persian miniature painting while being on my trip in Iran, so it came up in a later state. While here the greatness of a story is highlighted, the change in aspect ratios of home TV and cinema presentations extended the screen to progress the inclusion of the viewer. This work is in Tilburg, the Netherlands, is based on the shifts of frame sizes, as well as its function as a pedestal too. I like to call it a brief media museum. The color panel of Flickr and a one-ton weighting Heidelberg printing press go hand in hand with Rich Rosen's golden rules of flaming, a guideline of how to gossip each other via the internet that he set up in the early 1980s, in the early days of blogging. The form of presentation as well as the natural embedding found its inspiration in the interface aesthetics, or let's say the other way around. Nature, the lake surface, led me to think to make this work and this choice in its execution. So this was a project on over the entire summer. This is my signature, which is also appearing there. Just to make it clear, actually, what I just said, so that it's like a kind of contemporary way of representing depths by using mirroring effects. And I really liked in this case that it's something very, let's say, up to date. But I come later to that it's actually also losing its how you say, like it's very time-based, let's say, in its aesthetics. How can an artist translate the idea of linking into an artistic work or process? The development of the IBM ThinkPad 700C involved a close working relationship with Kazuhiko Yamazaki, lead notebook designer at IBM's Yamato Design Center in Japan, and the industrial designer Richard Sepper. The design is based on the form of a traditional Japanese bento lunchbox, and it's been said that they came up with the design during a lunch break. On the picture, you see the fold-out butterfly keyboard, which appeared in the ThinkPad 701 series. It is also designed by Zapper and is widely considered a design masterpiece and is on display at the Museum of Modern Art in New York. I enjoyed the idea of the distribution of aesthetics and cultural backgrounds leading to its design. I was in New York while making the work and constantly looking for fake sushi to order it online. A month later, for a summer break in Amsterdam, I kept on getting advertisement for sushi vouchers. Even when I was Googling Mr. Nelson's achievements about hypertext, I was confronted with it. This ended up in this work, combining a Gestetner rotary stencil machine from the 19th century with a print of a screenshot with an advertisement for sushi in Amsterdam, which actually locates you back. So it's actually, and the print is even said in Amsterdam on which date. So it's really like as if the digital reminds you again where you are, actually. My research in 2012 was mainly based on the question how far materials shape our daily lives or play an important role in the change of social economical developments. Within this question, I come back to my, if you want to call it, heritage. My hometown steel production, the economy of neo-industrial materials, as well as a lack of future foresight slowly dimmed industrial output in the rural area. Aluminium alloys and the plastic evolution turned the needs upside down, changed products, processes, raw material flows, and led to a different social infrastructure. With the show at the Kunstfreie Münster, I was mainly interested in how far the green economies, a rapid growing business, led to the need of lighter and resource-saving material inventions. Looking at its advertisement trend character, I found shifts in material advertising rhetoric. Against the backdrop of the botanical garden, I created a site-specific group of work divided in sections, like you would say in German, Themenparks or Themenlandschaften, both playing with the didactical function of a presentation for its own sake and as a display of a possible future strategy. I considered the fact that the early botanical gardens were mostly built for economical reasons, to research the economical extra value of plants. Economic botany is an established expression as well as a capitalization of natural goods. The title of the show, Blue Greens, underlines eco-capitalistic implementation of nature as natural capital. The aversion of free market principles to achieve environmental aims or concerns must be contrasted with the term red greens, the eco-socialist dismantling of capitalism, focusing on common ownership. My interest herein arises out of the strict differentiation of approaches and in how for nature is treated as capitalized material. In the crude oil seam section, which you actually see here, the latest online applications for electricity usage, advertisement footage for the fuel consumption reducing motors, as well as worldwide resource developments went hand in hand with carbon fiber research for mainstream applications. The entire sculptural installation is made out of aluminium bars, as well as the monitor film footage narrates the trivialize the mining of aluminium mineral bauxite, up to the recovery of the demolished landscapes. The trend of ecological conscious production find even its entrance in the Philharmonic Orchestra music. We can be heard in the entire space of another Themenpark, called the Colossus of Mass Production. In here, the Detroit, actually that's funny enough, I am here now, as I also used that work in a lecture also once before, and yeah, then I was not in Detroit. In here, the Detroit Philharmonic Orchestra wrote a classical music composition for the Ford Company that described the history of mass production, both heroic and Hollywood sentimental. My trip to Ford's latest production plant in Detroit in 2011 and its visitor center gave me the insight that even here they started rooftop gardening, but are still proud of the latest state-of-the-art F-150, the most sold pickup car in the world, but also one of the most fuel-consuming. My interest in the visit center representation is purely the marketing strategy, and it's overlapping with artistic strategies that are used for advertisement reason, as well as a latent educational imposition. As I mentioned before, for example, in the RGB color still life and computer aesthetics. Mm-hmm. Oh, it was on the desktop. Pity. Wait, I could exit the show. Going on here, and then starting it.
Welcome to a new world of visionary mobility. Mobility that will change the way we live and move in our cities. With pure progressive shapes to fascinate us. With lightning performance to excite us. With intelligent applications and services to help us relax. Welcome to a new world of visionary mobility. Where electric cars are fun to drive and reflect responsibility. Where super light and super strong carbon fibers set new standards in range and safety. And where sustainability extends to all areas of our lives. It's time to start a new way of thinking. BMW i. Born electric.
No, I'm not sponsored by BMW. But they gave me that comprehensive visionary footage. Here we see the future effects of carbon fiber for the way we live and move in our cities. That's what they say. Where Adam and Eve live in a sustainable paradise, where sustainable ideas reach all areas of our life. BMW, there's footage. Okay, what does it has to do with sculpture? The interest on mass production and its economical structures are an important inspiration for my copy and real objects questioning. I don't see myself as having an activistic denounce role. However, I do have a critical perception. I'm interested in how far those materials bear meaning that goes beyond their everyday tool usage. It is as if I want to know the link between the Bronze Age and its successors, as well as the artwork Box with the Sound of Its Own Making by artist Robert Morris. Or, to use the German word Materialgerechtigkeit, truth to material, as it is used in the 80s architecture called Beton Brut. Here you can explore the traces of its production, but then go one step further, and keeping in mind the entire circulation of production, usage, and significance of the material. Or a bit like a pret-a-manger or eat food cup that mention the carbon footprint and regional sources of its production. An artist is not working as a company, but I do think that there are parallels in how far one is reviewing phenomena, whether from socio-cultural or individual perspectives. Cultural developments and technologies were and are always linked to visual representation and are based on material needs. I see corporate foresight, for example, which you have in business, or technology scouting, the way it is used in company strategies, as an interesting approach to map those phenomena by the provision of traces. In the same way that humans, among them Ford, for example, invented the idea of trends, corporate foresight works as a visionary, a clairvoyant or exactly those. Aesthetics and the technology developments are in a continuous state of flux that leads to outdated model palettes and changes in trends. This is the exhibition from just this spring. Online advertising saved the internet browsing patterns of users as a source for mining the traces of data usage and combining them algorithmically to create advertising that is fine-tuned to the information the user has browsed through. That leads to a vast amount of layered information that generates advertising that is time and geo-specific. However, more often than not, the seemingly precision of mathematics leads to a disorder that is caused by the non-hierarchical browsing patterns of individuals. I create a sculptural algorithm to couple this hyperlink research structure with personal experience elements and synchronize it with traces of cultural history. Heat foils, which you see here, that have the same temperature as a human body, hang from the ceiling and the walls, and are not only sensory elements that form links through individual works, but a room-filling work via the warmth. The reproductions of famous still life paintings. Here's another example of the stretching of those elements. The reproduction of famous still life paintings from the collection of the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam shows a supply-demand model similar to an automatically generated online advertising. The more valuable a painting is, the cheaper and more mass-produced its copies will become. Included in the still life are the tablecloths and napkins reproduction of still life with asparagus, together with exotic foods and spices, alluding to an extension or adaptation of the still life in its historical exotic embedment. Alibaba, actually it's funny, I made this work in March, and when people came into that show, I really had to explain every time what Alibaba is. And I really told them, like, okay, wait another 4 weeks, and then you will know, actually, because then it made its entrance on the stock market. Alibaba.com is one of the biggest e-trade platforms, one of the biggest, or now it is actually, specialized in out-of-the-factory wholesales. Alibaba and the 40 Thief is a famous tale that is originally included in the 1001 Night Stories. The 3 automated translations which appear in the work, Chinese, Arabic, and English, of the original interview given by the Chinese founder of Alibaba, Jack Ma, talk about the invention of the website. The global familiarity of the name Alibaba, together with the, in the same time, Arabic roots of the tale, pushes the purely commercial and superficial background of the trading site and its non-specific rooting. One can see imagery of 18th century Chinese export painting and screenshots from personal research results. in this work. And this is the last bigger installation I did in May, and it actually continued circling after that, like parts of the works, partly that they grouped again. This installation was called Hello Prediction Data Mining. The part specifically for my latest research into the history of markets and exchange values. In opposition to digital marketplaces, in society, in need of marketplace with an actual physical appearance can be sensed. In addition to the recent collapse of the financial market, here seems to be a new need for a marketplace that can literally be seen again, that is transparent and through its actual presence can be understood and trusted. However, within the overload of digital information, such transparency is complicated. In Hello Prediction Data Mining, I juxtapose the research in latest developments in digital marketing and markets with a sculptural approach. Building upon my fascination for standard and shiny corporate displays, I intend to create a total installation of transparent acrylic glass cubes piled up on each other and on top of monitors and light boxes. Within each box, a specific selection of text is placed. In the installation, I incorporate different digital information sources and their hyperlink associations, showing their layers, the interconnectedness, yet at the same time critically showing the complexity of a possible transparency. Individual, these see-through cubes reference a minimalist art history. Together, they become a collage of sculptural forms and information formats. As such, Hello Prediction Data Mining forms a literal transparent display of information, a physical marketplace of information in which the ephemeral and quick information flows receive a concrete form and question the monumental status of markets. These are some detailed shots. This one is, for example, called Prediction Towers, and the footage it's from the Gestetner Hype Circle footage, and what you actually see is like a kind of clairvoyant, let's say, of the future markets and how they will appear and how technology in it will actually first rise up to a certain kind of hype and then will fall down in the let's say in the reality shocks. In that sense, that often a lot of data applications are not available yet in the daily life, but actually has to get through a process of establishing. Okay, the scanners, projectors, and technologies were, when I once bought, included them in my works, state of the art. They are outdated now. As one is anyways always behind schedule, knowledge that is outdated by the speed of developments. My interest again lies in the temporalities that leave symbolic traces. My key concern within my artistic practice is to name those traces, to create new traces by overlapping, or highlight the awareness of temporalities, and to sculpture those into one a little bit longer lasting form. Thank you.